Baltimore Ravens wide receiver Jakobi Lane was one of my favorite picks from the 2026 NFL draft, and he is quickly moving up boards through the preseason. I'm going to break down my seasonal expectations for the big playmaker out of Baltimore. I'm also going to talk his rookie classmate Elijah Sarratt, and perhaps most importantly for this video, I'm also going to break down a sneaky sleeper tight end who I think could end up potentially the best value coming out of Baltimore this season. Let's start here with the tape profile for Jakobi Lane, wide receiver for the Baltimore Ravens, coming out of USC. Folks, if you learn even one new thing from this video, do me a huge favor. Give it a like. Make sure you are subscribed, because we have a ton of rookie, dynasty, devy, college fantasy football content coming out to help you win those fantasy football championships. Playing for the Trojans, Lane showed excellent ball tracking ability. He consistently won above the rim. He consistently won along the boundary, and he certainly got the size profile to fit that big man playmaker ability. Lane is coming in at 6'4", 200 pounds. And when he went to the Baltimore Ravens, I was thrilled. A lot of folks got turned off by the scheme, the system, the passing volume. But what I saw was actually a brand new coaching staff, an offensive scheme that I think is going to be tweaked to highlight a skill set like Jakobi Lane. And more importantly, the Ravens have been looking to try to get this type of target for Lamar Jackson in DeAndre Hopkins, right? In Odell Beckham Jr. And Jakobi Lane, you have a young version of this, a guy that displays vertical athleticism, a guy that has great boundary speed. Now, the big red flag for Jakobi Lane throughout the draft process is if you go back and you watch his tape, there are a ton of concentration drops. If you look at the best of Jakobi Lane tape last season, I thought he was a first-round NFL draft type talent, but the hands were a legitimate concern. That showed up with a 7.5% drop rate last season, but he did still catch 66% of his targets, and he did put up 1,368 career receiving yards, 18 career touchdowns at USC. The majority of that happened last season. He only really played one full season as a starter for the Trojans, so a really productive final campaign. And this preseason, he's absolutely shown up. The hype, the beat reports have been outstanding all off season. The drum beat was building up. He came out his first preseason game. He looked excellent, touchdown, winning over the middle of the field. For me, that's what's most notable. He's not just stuck to the boundary. That's what we saw at USC. That gives me a little bit more confidence in his versatility here. He is lined up 70% out wide. That makes sense. He should pretty much live along the boundary. That's the role we should expect him to play in this offense. Now, we're going to get into this a little bit more, but the key is going to be how much a 12 and 13 personnel do the Ravens play. I think it's going to be a decent amount, and the key is going to be, is Lane out there in the two with the twos here with Zay Flowers playing inside, and I think that's the spot he's going to be in. So even if the Ravens are playing an 11 personnel, I think Lane is going to be out there getting snaps, and with a 93% route rate while he's out on the field this preseason, that's a positive indication of legitimate fantasy football potential. Now, a lot of folks actually liked Elijah Sarratt more than Jakobi Lane coming through the pre-draft process. I did not. I think draft capital reflected how the Ravens felt about him at the time, but there were reasons to like Sarratt's filming coming out of Indiana, at James Madison before that, at St. Francis of Pennsylvania before that. He consistently won in contested catch situations, sure-handed. You know, Sarratt, especially at Indiana, really displayed the ability to win at all three levels of the field. He's physical, he's scrappy. He was able to win through his routes, especially playing over the middle of the field. He played in that Hoosier scheme that really highlighted his skill set. But at 6'2", 210, I was really worried about his inability to separate, right? And I think that's why he went a little bit later than a lot of folks expected him to. The production profile was outstanding, 72% reception a career, just a 3.6% drop rate, 11.8 ADOT. He did win a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage, but 3,652 receiving yards, 44 receiving touchdowns. I mean, truly fantastic production. And now Sarratt has not been getting out necessarily with the first team. He's rotating a little bit deeper on and playing a little bit later into the game. But even still, 8 targets. He's caught 7 of those. That's outstanding. 9.9 yards per reception. He's winning a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage. And I think a big indicator here, he's actually lined up. He's aligned in the slot 43% of the time. I think a lot of folks have been projecting Elijah Sarratt to rotate with Rashad Bateman. And I think on like a linear depth chart, that makes sense. But I think what we might need to be thinking Elijah Sarratt, he has a little bit more of the slot option here that's going to rotate onto the field as Zay Flowers naturally needs to rotate off. Now, I will say they have LeJohntay Weister as well, who they do like. He came out of Colorado a few years. Weister is going to primarily be on the team as a returner, special teams guy. But if Sarratt is lining up in the slot a lot, I think it'll be between him and Weister for who's going to be on the field when Zay Flowers, either comes off the field or moves around, because Flowers will, align more in a Z position at times. So it'll be interesting to see here. But here's the sleeper I alluded to. I like what I have seen with my eyes from Matthew Hibner. And let's keep in mind here, this is a Declan Doyle offense, brand new offensive coordinator, but he's coming over from Chicago. And last year we saw in that Ben Johnson tree, right, the not only willingness, but really emphasis on using multiple tight ends. And the beat reports on Mark Andrews this offseason have not been good. They've been negative. So I think there's an opportunity here for Matthew Hibner to be a legitimate contributor. We're going to talk about his actual seasonal projection here. I think he could make an impact. If you go back to his SMU tape, he wins in traffic. He wins over the middle field. I loved breaking down his tape. And by the way, I want to emphasize, I've watched full tape reviews on everybody who I'm talking about. I've been tracking these guys for years, and Hibner in particular, his ability to continue upfield with fluidity after the catch, that's a really nice leading indicator for me of potential fantasy football value. He's got an effective catch radius. He wins off target, and a big important thing, he has a high motor blocker. He has effective handwork. He's able to push guys back in the run game, and that's going to get you on the field with the Ravens. They're going to be out there in 12 and even 13 personnel at times. It seems evident from everything the Ravens are telling us and the Ravens beat that Hibner is the tight end 2 behind Andrews, probably the heir apparent to that role. Joshua Cuevas, fellow rookie, a bit more in that blocking specific role. He's caught all 5 of his targets this preseason. He's looked good doing it. The second snap of preseason action, they took a shot along the boundary downfield for him. He's lined up 83% in line. That's not super surprising. I do like seeing 10% slot. Even more, I like seeing 7% out wide. They're looking to see how they can align Matthew Hibner and get him onto the field. 12.2 yards per reception. That's the highest that we've talked about for this Ravens offense. That's a really nice number to look at here when you're considering future projection. Now, folks, let's go ahead. Let's take a look at my actual projections for this offense here. To do that, we're going to pull up rookiebigboard.com, where you can go on. We now have the feature to look up team by team projections here. So I've got the wide receiver selected for the Baltimore Ravens. If you want to check this out, you can head to the link in the episode description, rookiebigboard.com, and you can check it out for every single team here. A really cool way to look at the projections. Now, if you're looking at this offense, Zay Flowers is clearly the lead guy. But as I mentioned, I think the 2 in this offense is going to be Jakobi Lane, and I've got him with a high target rate. I've got him with a solid reception rate. The hands have not been a problem this offseason, but let's be realistic with what we saw at the college level. Let's not give him a super high catch rate. 712 receiving yards, and I've got him at 4 receiving touchdowns. This is where I'm being a little bit conservative with Jakobi Lane, and I love Jakobi Lane. I want to project him for like 7 touchdowns and just go all in. That's where you kind of need his number to be super, super high on Jakobi Lane, but I am high on him. I think the receiving yards and the targets, back that up here. I'm a bit lower on Elijah Sarratt, and he actually got a bit of a bump here in my projections with the Rashad Bateman news and the overall lack of excitement for Rashad Bateman this offseason. So I think between Bateman and Sarratt, you're really thinking about, the leftover wide receiver 3 type targets. And again, I think Weister LeJohntay Wester will kind of rotate in there a little bit. But let's pop over to the tight ends here, and let's look at Matthew Hibner. Now, I said Mark Andrews is still going to be the guy, but I've got him close. 57 targets for Mark Andrews, 38 targets for Matthew Hibner. By the way, I mentioned Joshua Cuevas, the rookie. I actually don't have him projected out for much in terms of target load because I think Durham Smythe is the actual tight end 3, probably a bit more of a blocking tight end 3, but not really super fun for a video like this, but realistic, it's Durham Smythe that's going to get, that tight end 3 blocking work. Now, Hibner, if he can get 27 receptions and 3 receiving touchdowns, I know that doesn't sound super, super exciting, but I'm telling you folks, in terms of being a really good indicator for future fantasy football success, year 2 tight end breakout is absolutely still in play here in the way that we project out future value. Matthew Hibner could be a absolute rocket value looking into next season. And we are going to go ahead and take a look at not only Hibner, but all of these guys in the context of the other wide receivers in the fantasy football landscape this year. Starting here with Jakobi Lane. Overall, his projection is wide receiver 53. I mentioned I like Lane. I'm aggressive on Lane. Wide receiver 53. He's making it in your starting lineups in October, right? Bye weeks, injuries. He's a flex play potentially for you right off the bat, right? Depending on your league format settings. Again, I mentioned if I could have given him 7 touchdowns instead of 4, we'd be talking about him as wide receiver 40, right? It's that close in this range. It's really packed in. As context here, he's just behind Romeo Doubs, another guy who has shown talent, shown the ability to win downfield. It's just going to be a matter of the overall volume, right? It's kind of a question for Doubs of volume relative to other good playmakers in the New England offense. For Jakobi Lane, as excited as I am about him, we do still have to be realistic about the overall passing load that we can realistically project for this Ravens offense. I think it'll be a bit more for Lamar this year, but I don't think it's, transcending the level of run pass balance that we're going to get in this offense that still features a very powerful Derrick Henry, right? And an offensive line that has been schemed up and has been built out to be a really solid blocking core, especially on the ground. But how about Ryan Flournoy? He's wide receiver 54. And normally, I tried to, really emphasize the player that I'm focusing on in here in Jakobi Lane. But Ryan Flournoy, folks, as a note, big sleeper candidate for me. I loved his tape coming out of SEMO a few years ago. Dallas has been slowly giving him more and more snaps over the last 2 years, and I think he's legitimately the wide receiver 3 in this Dallas offense. So that's your bonus nugget here. A historical comparison. How might Jakobi Lane produce fantasy points in a similar way to a player that we can relate to? Well, let's go back to 2018 here. I do have a database where I track all rookie production here. It helps inform my projections for these guys. And Courtland Sutton in 2018, it's a bit lower of a receiving percentage, but the receiving yards of 704, the 4 receiving touchdowns, right? Like making weekly impact, being a difference maker, but not like blowing it out of the water type rookie production. That reminds me of Courtland Sutton going back to 2018. Let's talk about Elijah Sarratt. I've got him a bit lower here, as you could expect. Wide receiver 102. Now, here's the thing. Wide receiver 101, Olamide Zaccheaus, 103, Chimere DK. These guys, they're going to factor into the fantasy landscape at some point, especially for those of us playing in deeper leagues. So I'm not sitting here trying to slander Elijah Sarratt. Let's just be realistic about our expectations here. Zaccheaus, DK, these are not guys who are in the 1 deep, right? These are guys that are in the 2 deep, and Sarratt's in the 2 deep. He happens to be in the 2 deep in a passing offense that is a bit lower volume. We've got to be realistic about that. But that doesn't mean there's no hope here, folks. Let's go back to 2024. If you look at my Sarratt projection, it's not super far off of what we saw from Jalen Coker that season. 70% reception, 478 receiving yards, 2 receiving touchdowns. Coker was wide receiver 82 that year. Now, a big difference here is Coker really came on through the end of the year, right? So it was backloaded production. Sarratt has the opportunity to potentially do that. Let's see if he beats out Bateman over the course of the season, if he's able to rotate more into the slot, if Zay moves around a little bit more, right? This is a fluid developing offense, so don't be totally, and I know I'm lower on Sarratt than consensus, but don't be totally turned off if Sarratt isn't producing, in the first 8 weeks, if you're all in on him, give him time to find his role and let the offense find what his role potentially could be. But let's finish up with Matthew Hibner, because I got a little aggressive in this projection. I'm telling you, folks, tight end 40. I know that doesn't sound super exciting, but when you're doing seasonal projections, you have to understand, like, it's all relative, right? In the projection, of what was the initial expectation. And I think on draft day back in April, Hibner, you'd have him as tight end 70 in terms of projections. And I did, right? I do projections for these guys on draft weekend. But hearing his role develop, hearing how excited the coaching staff is about him, hearing how not necessarily excited the coaching staff is about Mark Andrews, Hibner's now up to tight end 40. That's a massive bump. And that's going to put him right behind Mason Taylor, a tight end who's rotating, with Kenyon Sadiq. And then Max Clare, a tight end who's rotating with Terrence Ferguson and probably Colby Parkinson as well. By the way, Max Clare might get his own episode because Max Clare looked awesome in preseason action. I'm super excited about Max Clare. Despite, him being one spot lower than Matthew Hibner, he is above Hibner in my dynasty rankings, but Hibner has absolutely been a riser. And looking for a historical rookie season comparison here, AJ Barner, that really jumps out. 78% catch rate, 245 receiving yards, 4 receiving touchdowns. The 4 receiving touchdowns is a massive number. If any rookie tight end hits 4 receiving touchdowns, they're going to be an impact player. Barner was that year 34, tight end 34, despite inconsistent production. I had Hibner there at 3. That's really close to a really leading indicator for me of tight end fantasy football success. So there you have it, folks. Those are 3 rookies here who I do expect to make an impact not only on the Baltimore Ravens offense, but also on the fantasy football landscape this season. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like. Again, subscribe, folks, because we have a ton more dynasty, rookie, devy, college fantasy football, and NFL draft content coming your way to help you win those fantasy football championships.